theswirlworld.com. Podcast episode 124.
The Swirl World.
Interracial.
Diverse.
Beautiful.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Swirl World podcast. This is your co-host, Michelle Matthews Calloway. Over on the blog and on our Facebook pages, we often receive a lot of emails and inboxes from Black women who are curious about dating interracially. Because we know that some Black women don't have a lot of experience in this area, we focus a lot on vetting. Our last podcast dealt with vetting, and we asked the question, are you a desperado? Are you someone who is so desperate for love that you settle for any kind of treatment? If you're savvy when it comes to vetting, you'll know to be on the lookout for certain behaviors, certain words, certain actions, and frankly, certain statements. In today's podcast, Adrienne is doing a recap from an episode of 50 Days of Dating Season 2. In that episode, Rachel encountered someone who, for all intents and purposes, was a racist. He talked about his racist family, but because of his weakness in his position on how he would handle his racist family, he was basically joining them. Adrienne discusses the importance of vetting and how to vet when it comes to dealing with racism, what to look for, and especially to pay attention to what's being said. I think you're going to find this episode extremely interesting as well as enlightening. Keep listening.
Well, hello and welcome. This is Adrienne London Leach coming at you from theswirlworld.com, where we celebrate Black women and the diverse men who love us. Well, we've recapped all the way, I think, up to about day 35. She had also reached out to a government employee that was also interested in dating Rachel. So she said, well, let me see. And she put him into the mix because, of course, he met the basic requirements. Rachel had an intensive conversation with Mr. Government Employee and found out some very, very interesting and important things about him and his family. One of the things that we often tell you is to vet well. And in vetting, you have to listen, but you also have to ask really good questions. One of the questions that Rachel asked, and I recommend that you ask it also, not only of the person that you potentially may date, but of yourself. And that was, he had not dated interracially before. So she asked, why now? It is a fair question, and it's a good question, because if the person is being honest, it will help you determine where their headspace is at. And also for you that are venturing into the interracial dating scene, you need to ask yourself that question also, because you need to know where your headspace is at before you venture out into the dating scene, especially the interracial dating scene. Mr. Government Employee had explained that he was in a loveless marriage, which he had ended. It was a marriage that his family wanted him to be in, and that he had always had an attraction for Black women. Seems reasonable. I think that when you begin to date and date with purpose, you're going to find that there are going to be a lot of men that have been in that situation, and they are just stepping up and saying, no more. I'm going to date whom I choose, and I choose to date beautiful Black women. So far, so good. No problems with that. But Rachel is a smart person, and she probed even further. She said, okay, well, your family did this. I mean, your family wanted you to marry her, and now that you're out of it, and you said that you've taken the first step in doing what you want, how would your family feel about you dating a black woman? This is where it gets bad. Mr. Government Employee said they wouldn't like it. Mr. Government Employee also said that family members, close family members, were members of hate groups, and that although he didn't agree with their stance, they were still his family. So Rachel, knowing that, well, yeah, we get it. We get that. We get family members that really are they don't agree. We don't agree with a lot of their stances, but they are our family members. And we tend to want to try, if we have a relationship with them, keep that relationship going. So that didn't alarm her quite as much, but this is what happened after that comment. Rachel also said, well, let me ask you something. If you started dating a black woman, and let's say you were dating for a while and there was a family get together, holiday event or whatever, and you brought her, and someone in your family made a racist comment, laughingly, making a joke out of it, and she didn't say anything, but you could see that she was visibly upset, even to tears, what would you do? His response was, well, I'll just discuss it with her later. I mean, after all, you said they were laughing, so it couldn't have been that big a deal. Rachel probed further and she said, well, wait a minute. I told you that she was visibly upset, that she was crying. And his response is, well, I wouldn't want to upset my family. So like I said, we would just discuss it later. That was not the correct answer. That also was a red flag. Honestly, he wasn't ready to be put in anyone's rotation to date, period. But we know he's not ready to date interracially. Me personally, he has some psychological scars that he needs to probably see a counselor for and really find out why he wants to date black women, especially when he has such an intensely racist family. Another thing, you don't know what else that his family has hidden or things they have done that he has gone along with all of this time simply because they were blood relatives. That's not very good, and that's not very smart. The one thing I will give him credit for was he was honest. He did say that he would choose his family over his date, girlfriend, whatever. That's good to know, because there was no need to continue further. So as Rachel always does, she wished him the best, ended the conversation, blocked him from the dating site, blocked him from her dating phone, which I would say any of us would have done. Or would we? Would we have listened to this story and decided that, well, maybe it wasn't as bad as he said? I'd like to discuss it more. Or is it one of those things that, again, as I say over and over, you're not listening to what the person is saying about themselves, because people are who they say they are. And ladies, you have to remember that most men aren't, say, game players, if I can use that word. They're pretty transparent. Usually, unless they're trying to run a game on you, usually, if you ask them a question, you will get the answer. And it is the truth. And you should believe it. And you shouldn't think that you are the person that can change their mind, their attitude, or their behavior. So, Mr. Racist determined that after all of these years, He wanted to now date interracially. However, he was willing to sacrifice nothing. He was not willing to stand up for whomever the woman is that he was going to date. We don't even know for sure that he would have ever brought her around his family for the sake of trying to be a part of the family, but then running off to be with her. Sometimes you have to make a choice. Mr. Government Employee wasn't ready to make that sacrifice. He wasn't ready to stand and say, this is my choice. Take it or leave it. I'm with her. And if you want to be a part of my life, then you're going to respect her. Mr. Government Employee was still a boy, wanting desperately to be thought well of and to continue to be a part of his family while still wanting to have his cake and eat it too. Well, what do you think about this? What are some of the things that you look for when it comes to red flags for people that have issues with race? We know that there are plenty of men on these dating sites that have ulterior motives that have nothing to do with loving beautiful Black women. So what do you do in order to weed them out? What is your process? Tell us in the comments below. And remember, date with purpose. Keep your options open and keep swirling.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. We're going to be featuring some more podcasts on the subject of vetting. Feel free to share this with someone you know would benefit from the information. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to like The Swirl World on Facebook and subscribe to the blog at theswirlworld.com.
Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast or listen directly from our Facebook page.
We can also be heard on SoundCloud and Stitcher Radio.
The Swirl World.
Interracial.
Diverse.
Beautiful.